Much like the Thompsons, this is also a show that belongs in the graveyard by now. I mean, it's not as bad because it's only been on for like 19 years and not 89 like the other show, but still that's about 15 years too many. And I couldn't call this show trash because at one time it was actually the best show on the History Channel. Like, even aside from being for children, there was still stuff even older people could appreciate. But that being said, it's not like Breaking Bad or something. Like, it's just a show. Yeah, people really worship it to this day. I really wonder if half the niggas who bring it up have even seen an episode of it recently, because it's complete garbage now and it's completely unrecognizable. And this isn't me being an old head, because I hate the 90s and the 2000s, both bum ass decades. As a matter of fact, I just hate being alive in itself. But before you losers get on my ass about criticizing your favorite show, let me just say that for this video we'll only be focused on the first 3 seasons and the first movie. But yeah, aside from that, we're not talking about that nonsense that's on TV now. Anyway, let's talk about the setting. So the show takes place in the Pacific Ocean after those nuclear tests, and as a result of the radiation, a bunch of fish are now intelligent and have recreated human society underwater. The show stars a yellow sponge Supreme Brick, who's like a man-child. He's either 14 or like 37. Nobody knows his age and it doesn't make any sense. Like, you would think he's a grown-ass man because he lives by himself and has a full-time job, but he's also in driving school and everyone talks to him like he still has recess. He has a pet's cat that they call a snail named Gerald that regularly displays more intelligence than him despite only making one sound. And he used to have a clam or something, but it's MIA now, so who cares. But yeah, he lives in an avocado in some lame-ass neighborhood with only 3 houses. Like, what the hell? The guy right next to him is a guy called Edward. Edward is a lame, yeah, he's also the realest nigga on the show, and it doesn't really make any sense. Like, he a lame in the sense that he plays his ear rape clarinet all day and isn't talented at all whatsoever, yet still think he deserves fame and money. Yeah, he's real in the sense that he recognizes that everyone in the town is a goofy that doesn't deserve respect. For some reason, the Brick has a boner for him and is always trying to get on him somehow and is dumb. Like, Edward will say that the Brick doesn't opt to his face, and yet he'll still try coming back. The third house on the block is a stone, and underneath is perhaps one of the worst characters in any show ever. It's some fat star tub of lard that's the Brick's best friend. The fatso is like the biggest op in the show. He's like the ogre from normal series, with even less redeeming qualities, and yet he gets treated regularly by all the characters for some reason. He's a complete dumbass that makes the Brick look like a brain surgeon, and when he's not the cause of the problem, he's just making it worse. I mean, he isn't so bad in the part of the series we're gonna focus on, but in this series as of the last 10 years, then yeah, he deserves to die. The star and the Brick also go catch jellyfish or something, it's just dumb. But like I said before, the Brick works at McDonald's, but he also works with Edward, and they're like the only 2 employees. While the Brick actually cares the job and would do it for free, once again Edward is half a real nigga, so he knows that there's no reason to actually try. Their boss is a cheap crab that loves money for no reason. Like, most niggas want money for clouts and bitches and weed and clothes or something, but this nigga just wants money to have money. Like, he's always off one and getting on Edward's ass about something, but if he feels some type of way so much, then how come he doesn't say anything? The crab has a dog that's a whale, and he really thinks his wife ain't cheat on him. And to make matters worse, his wife is nowhere to be seen, so now he's stuck raising a kid that's not even his. And the crab's arch enemy is his old best friend. He's like a green bean that thinks he's a plankton. The bean is pressed because he doesn't know how to make food, so he keeps trying to steal the McDonald's secret recipe. But if he's really trying to make a sandwich, then why doesn't he just go to Wendy's instead and break it apart? Like, he's a dumbass too. And he also has a computer wife, but she's not important, so we're not going to talk about her. But back to the square, he also goes to driving school, and he's complete trash at it. I mean, I know some of the guys would say I have no room to talk because I failed my test like twice, but this guy's just trying to hold an eternal L. Like, every test he crashes into anything he sees, and it's like, calm your ass down. His teacher is so over it that she even hopes he dies. And the Brick has a friend that's like a squirrel from Texas. She's also real as hell, like, she's smart and everything, but she low-key loses points for respecting the other people in town. Then there's this big ass lobster that's a celebrity or something, despite the fact that he's just a lifeguard and hasn't done anything of relevance. Then there's a pirate ghost and he doesn't really do anything actually, he's just there to be there. Then there's some fan parrot and his dumb parrots, and they're like in some episodes with specials or something, but we're not gonna go over them because they suck. Then there's some Batman and Robin ripoff, except the main guy is Aqualad and senile, so they low-key cause all the problems they try to solve. I mean, they have some ops like a bubble and some suit guy, but they don't really matter. So now we're gonna go over a couple classic and actually good episodes because they're only like 11 minutes long. So one episode, the Bean tries to scheme the Brick by offering him a reward if he tells him how to make a basic food item. Then the Brick decides to be unhelpful, so the Bean starts spazzing out before he gets thrown out by the crab. Then the crab tells the Brick to look out, even though he was already doing what he was supposed to, but the Brick is off one, so he starts beating on some rando. So once again, the crab just confirms the obvious and things are back to square one. So then the Bean makes a robot version of the crab, but Edward isn't with the gimmicks, so he knows what's up. But then the Bean tells Edward he can go home, so he gets out of the way quick. Like, if you wants to leave so bad, you could have left anyway, cause either way the actual crab would have been pissed as hell. So then the robot sees the Brick and tries to do what he came to do, but then the real crab shows up, so he has to get him out of the way too. Like previously mentioned, the crab has a hard on for money, so the robot just passes a penny on the floor, and that's enough to make his op run a marathon. What a bum. So once again, the Beast tries to get the McDonald's recipe, but the Brick tells him they need to do all kinds of nonsense first, so understandably he feels some type of way. After he's ready to catch a body, the Brick tells him that he can't actually say the recipe, so he'll just give it to him in written formats. Somehow the penny landed right back in the restaurant, so the crab meets the robot and they have some sort of standoff. Since the Brick lacks basic intelligence, he is confused as to who was his boss and who was his op, so he asks them dumb irrelevant questions that the robot gets right. So he gets the real crab out of the way and prepares to give the recipe to the op, but then he puts a coin in his slot, and it turns out that the Bean is such a psycho that he coin operated his machine for jihad, as if he would ever need to do that. So he tries to run for his life back home, but it's too late, and the Bean is put on the news, while the recipe goes back to McDonald's. So the Brick saves the real crab from death, and asks for forgiveness, which he somehow gets, and that's how the episode ends. The next episode on the list is one of the top 3 episodes of the entire series. It starts out with Edward being a lame and assaulting everyone's ears with his garbage mixtape. So the doctor comes because he thinks an animal just became a pack, and then Edward feels some type of way because he's just trash at life in general. Then he gets a call from his main op, who basically just tells him that he's rich and that Edward is just mad because he's broke, and offers him an opportunity to play at the Super Bowl, just so that he can hear him say that he has no band. But Edward doesn't want to go out like a hoe, so he accepts the offer and puts up posters all around the block asking for people to join his band. So by the time the guys get gathered, pretty much the whole town shows up, yet not one nigga in the group has any musical ability whatsoever. Like, these guys be asking the dumbest questions and wasting time, so Edward takes it upon himself to teach them how to play, even though he himself is trash. So they start playing instruments wrong, and the squirrel gives the star an L. Then these two fish go terrorists and put themselves on a shirt. So after everyone plays their instruments too loud, the townspeople start to beef with each other, even though they're all the cause of their own problems. So after they destroy everything, Edward starts whining, but nobody cares until the Brick tells him to pretend that Edward is actually relevant or important. So Edward meets up with his operator to laugh at him, but surprisingly the Brick managed to actually make the town have talent, and they have a gay old time, while Edward's op has a heart attack and gets put in the dirt. A classic ends to a classic episode. So the next episode is about the guys chopping door to door. So it starts out with the Brick going in Edward's mailbox, which is a federal crime. He and the star see a magazine that has a bunch of rich niggas and how they live. So despite the fact that he's at least old enough to live by himself, the Brick has no idea how people can be so wealthy. So Edward tells him that they're entrepreneurs, so the Brick and the star decide to make their own business and live the big life too. Instead of selling something that can actually get them money, like food, or that green stuff, or stocks, or that white stuff, they decide to sell chocolate door to door. So the first guy they visit is some psycho who starts shouting and chasing them off the block. Then the next guy finesses them by getting them to buy his stuff, and they're dumb as hell, so they go on about without realizing their L. Then the next house they go to, they take so long because of what they got from being finessed, so the woman refuses to give them the time of day like any other reasonable person. So after realizing that they're L's, the guys try to think of some new strategies to get customers. So they try to emulate the finesser by being nice, but then this man, the star, goes off the wall and says some weirdo stuff like I love you to one guy, so naturally he was told to piss off. Then they try again, but the guy says he doesn't eat chocolate because it made him obese, much like the star is trying to sell to him now. Then the weirdo star buys another man's picture, but honestly such nonsense is unsurprising. So then the guys decide to increase their sales by capping about their product. So they tell an old woman and her damn near corpse mother that if they rub chocolate on their skin, they'll be immortal, so they finally catch a W. Then they start fooling more clowns across the town when they decide to act injured in order to sell chocolates. But they go to the finesser's house, and this time he schemes up by giving them some funny ass speech about how his life is even worse than theirs, and of course they buy chocolate from him, continuing his finesse streak. So the guys finally realize that it's over for them when the psycho shows up and corners them. So it turns out he really just wants to buy chocolates. Okay, but why do you have to start screaming and chasing them out of the block? Like, what part of the game is that? So now that the guys are rich, instead of using the money to actually do something important, they blow it all in order to screw over Edward and take the old woman and the living corpse on a date. You know, the good stuff. So this final episode is one I'm sure you all remember. It starts out with Edward thinking he's about to catch a W because his ops are camping, but it turns out that the camping just means you go 10 feet in front of your house and set up a tent now. So Edward goes outside and prepares to get them out of the way. But when he gets there, he thinks they're trying to play him and say he's pussy, so he decides to camp too. But as previously established, he's trash at everything, so he fails to set up a tent or basically do anything really, so he has no choice but to lay on the dirt. So they start roasting marshmallows, and Edward tries to go back to the crib to get something, but once again they try playing him, so he has no choice but to stay. But then the star insists on making his life not worth living, and keeps blowing his trash burnt marshmallows on Edward's face. Then the Brick sings one of the most iconic songs of this century, the Campfire Song, a classic remembered by entire generations. Being untalented, Edward feels some type of way about the song, so he plays one of his own on his trash-ass recorder. Then the Brick throws a marshmallow at him in an attempt to smoke him like a backwood. So the other guys tell him that they were trying to get him out of the way to prevent a sea bear from coming, so they tell him all the causes of an attack, but since Edward is a non-believer, he acts out all of them. Then the sea bear appears and damn near puts him on the news, and the bear has made sure not to harm the others because they have some circle in the dirt or something. So Edward tries to recreate the circle, but only manages to bring himself closer to the grave. Eventually Edward jumps in the circle and gets saved, but his L has only just begun because a rhino has appeared that won't be stopped by a circle, but also wants to attack the brick and the star, so it's a tragedy. But yeah, this show was on everyone's top 10 list when we were growing up, so seeing as this was like the biggest show, it only made sense for there to be a movie made about it. And this was like a real life theater movie too, and not like a TV movie either. So the movie starts out with the brick saving some guy's life with a sandwich in his dreams, like the sicko he is. So it turns out that this day is the grand unveiling of the second McDonald's right next to the first one, and the brick thinks he's gonna be the manager. Meanwhile, the bean is hurt because he never held a W in his life, but then he finds out he made a plan that he forgot about somehow and decides to act on it. So when he gets to McDonald's, the crowd completely screws him over and says that the new manager will actually be Edward, despite the fact he has an obvious disdain for his current job. To add on to this betrayal, the rest of the op-ass townspeople clown him for being a man-child, so he walks away depressed. Meanwhile, the bean is doing missions and stealing Poseidon's crown, so then the brick and the star get wasted on ice cream at a children's restaurant because their growth was stunted, and Poseidon pulls up on the crab because he thinks he finessed his crown, and right before he puts him on a shirt, the brick shows up still drunk and calls him out for screwing him over. But then he realizes that the king is not about any games, so the brick decides to save the crab by getting back the crown. Also, the star shows up to make stuff harder, and then he gets a hard on for the king's daughter. So the main characters roll up in a Ford and get clowned by two bumps because they know they won't last. So as soon as they cross the county line, they get finessed in a way that completely hosed them, yet they still believe they walked away with a W simply because they lasted 12 seconds. In order to get the Ford back, they go on some lame ass adventure in some bar where the leader is pressed over bubbles. But they manage to get their keys back and escape, so that's that. But now that the crab is out of the way, the bean gets the recipe to make the McDonald's sandwiches and starts selling them in his own backwater restaurant. And since the townspeople have no loyalty, they immediately switch sides to the bean's restaurant. And the bean also hires a hitman to get the main niggas' names on a stone. Then Edward notices that everyone is wearing lame ass buckets on their head, and also that the bean is selling actual sandwiches. So he tries to pull up on the bean, but it turns out that the bucket can actually control the people, so the bean orders them to violate Edward. So the main niggas end up losing their Ford to a monster, but this time it's permanent, so they prepare to accept their L. But then the king's daughter shows them what the bean has done, and also tells them that they're men, so they sing a song and get through a bunch of monsters. But then the hitman shows up and brings them back down to earth, and right before he puts them in the dirt, he gets put in the dirt himself by some other guy. And then this other guy takes the heroes and brings them to his shop above water, so he puts the main niggas in the lights, and they get put on a shirt. And I'm not even gonna flex, when I first saw this as a kid, it really put me in my feelings. I mean, now when I see, I low-key wish that everyone else in the town had died too, but back then you know things weren't so bad. But it turns out that their tear causes sprinkler to turn on and bring them back to the living, along with all the other packs in the room. Then they hand the shop guy an L, and the main characters get it right from that guy from Baywatch. But it turns out that the hitman was still alive, and he tries to finish the job, but then he really becomes a pack. So right before Poseidon can get the crab out of the way, the brick and the star pull up and give the king back his crown. But then the bean puts the king under his control and really prepares to give everyone their final L. But the brick starts singing and blasting niggas, which frees them I guess, and they all trample the bean and he gets arrested. So the movie ends with the brick being the manager of the new McDonald's. This is honestly a perfect ending to the series, but then they ruined it by making new episodes. I mean, to be fair, some of the season 4 episodes are actually funny, but after that the show becomes irredeemable. But once again, the first season was so classic, I just couldn't call the show trash. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and also if you feel some type of way about me dissing the new episodes, even though I just sat here and acknowledged that the show used to be ace, then go fuck yourself and keep your L firmly grasped. But yeah, tell me about your favorite episodes in the comments, or other shows I should watch, preferably not kids shows like this, and that's about it. Okay guys, make sure that when you subscribe you hit the notification button, because that lets you know whenever I make a new video, and as always, thanks for watching.